Alright everybody, hey, this is Hogan Brown again with Loon Outdoors, and I'm going to show everyone here how to tie this fly right here. I call this the AP Baitfish. This is the all-purpose Baitfish. I spend a lot of my time, it's summer here in Northern California, and I spend a lot of my time during the summer guiding river stripers. But I also spend some time fishing for largemouth and stuff like that as well. And if you know bass species, they eat other fish, and having kind of a simple bait fish pattern that I can tie in a variety of different colors, weights, and on various hook shanks for various sizes is a pretty important kind of arrow in the quiver for me. And so I'm going to show you this one, and this is kind of my go-to. This is the all-purpose bait fish. So it's a lot of different hooks that I tie this on, but for this purpose I'm going to tie it on basically just a general saltwater hook. Okay, the Eric's streamer 1/0 saltwater streamer hook. It's an SA220, and it does have a longer shank than some of the other hooks. I also tie this on, say, the Gamakatsu SC10, SC15 to get that shorter hook shank and kind of shorten basically the profile of the fly. But for this one, for general purpose, I'm going to show you on this one. And so I'm going to start my thread. I use with basically all my saltwater bass striper flies, I use white thread. This is 8/0 white. And I do that for a number of purposes. One, if you saw the head of that fly right here, I use a lot of different color UV fly finish and such. And white just kind of takes that color a lot better than, say, any other color of thread. So it allows me to kind of build up a colored head and still maintain some accuracy with it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some just general pearl flash of blue, and with any bait fish fly, proportion, well, I guess really any fly, because trout flies, whatever you're tying, proportions important. So I take one strand, okay, and I fold it in half, and that gives me about the right length, okay, and I kind of move that to about mid hook shank. If you're tying on one of the shorter shank flies, it would be the entire hook shank, if that makes sense. So I take that, take my vice pawn, pop that down, hold it. Okay. Now again, with a lot of bait fish patterns, you can tie these things in any color palette or density of material to really tweak how that fly pushes water, the profile that it looks like, and really the color palette that these predator fish that you're creating it for are used to seeing it. So for me, I just tie this in a general kind of olive over white. And so the first part is I'm going to tie in some of this rainbow flash and slinky. Okay, and it's a kind of a, I like this rainbow flash and slinky because it kind of provides like a little darker top underneath the white, okay, that we're going to put on the bottom, and it allows us to kind of fade that color palette into maybe that darker top, which most bait fish or prey fish have. So for the under layer, just going to use some white flash and slinky for this color palette. And again, by all means, make this your own. Okay, you can, for the bass guys, or even for some of the striper guys, you can tie this in any kind of flashy color palette that you want. I'll tie it in chartreuse over white, I'll throw some hot pink in there, whatever it is. And all I'm doing right now is just kind of measuring this piece of flash and slinky to make sure that it's roughly the same length as that top piece. And when you're tying these bait fish patterns, especially with these synthetics, whether it's Flash and Slinky, Farrar Blend, you can always trim these up, right? So like if you get this and you're like, oh, like, you know, the white's maybe a little longer, that's okay, because you can trim it. Okay, you can take scissors and trim it to shape. It's nearly impossible to make it longer. So I always tend to err on the side of too long versus too short. Okay, so that's really the back of the fly, and I'm just going to kind of seal that down with a few thread wraps. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, because most of our fish that we're going to be fishing for are going to be some toothy critters, I'm going to seal that thread with some UV clear, and this is the Flow fly finish. Okay, actually I'm going to use the bigger bottle of thin. I remember I tied the Example and Flow was a little hard to handle. It's fine if you're tying for yourself, but if people are actually going to watch it, you want it to look a little cleaner. And to be honest, this is not a part of the fly that's going to get seen. This is a part of the fly that you don't want to unravel. Okay, because one thing, if you fish for these guys, this part of the fly is where that bite really comes down on, whether it's teeth, the rough sandpaper lips of a bass, whatever it is. When this gets stuck, this hook point gets stuck in their mouth, this part right here is where that lip is just grinding on. Okay, and so having a good kind of seal on there to protect those thread wraps is really important. So Flow, thick, whatever you want to use, just lock it in there. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add just a little bit more of those two base colors. So a little bit, running out of rainbow, a little bit of this rainbow Flash and Slinky. Take it, kind of measure it. Y'all want to, you know, you can kind of start to taper it right about here. So I'll make it like just a hair shorter. Okay. And I always save that, trim that off, save it. Okay. Again, kind of make sure it looks about the right. And again, we'll trim this up. And take a little bit of white. Right there, measure it. Set it right underneath. And pull it kind of back. Pop it down, trim that. Now, at this point, you can do a couple different things. I tend to, depending on the profile that you want to get out of this fly and how you want this fly to push water, really depends on what you use to build up the underbody. Since I'm fishing for stripers for the most part, I want this fly to announce its arrival. I want it to push some water. So I use this underbody. I use just basically olive bucktail. This is kind of a lighter or medium olive. And I'm going to set it right on top and split that body from the hook shank or the bend of the hook back about in half. And that's going to give us the profile that we want. Okay, tack that in there. And you do not want this to spin. Okay, that is definitely a style of fly that we spin that. Okay, but we are wanting that dark on top because what we're going to put underneath is going to be white. I'm going to take some white bucktail. nice piece of white. You can kind of see, pick those kind of under fibers out. I'm going to kind of measure it, make sure it's the same length as the olive, and then tack it right below. Right at that, I always kind of do little checks. You can kind of see the profile we're working with. Kind of the proportions, everything there. Keep that vise pond with all that stuff down. And the nice thing about the vise pond too, this is one thing that I didn't, I didn't even realize when I was first started using it, is it allows me to continually see the length and profile of all my materials. If this was gone and this starts getting cattywampus around, you don't really get to see the fly as it is going to be when it's pulled tight under tension in the water. So when you pull that back, you can kind of come back and look at the whole fly and see the profile and be like, okay, I know where I'm going to put my next set of materials. Now, at this point, there's a couple different things you can do to kind of tweak this fly. You saw in the example here, right here, that I put hackle down the sides. Okay, now this creates that nice lateral line, but if you look at the fly this way, and it's kind of hard to see, I'll put it in front here, but if you look at the fly this way, that's a fairly trim fly. Okay, it's wide but narrow. Okay, that's not going to push a ton of water, right? It's going to create this nice side profile, okay, but it's not going to push a ton of water because those hackles keep that fly pretty trim. So right here is where if you want to add those hackles, you would. Okay, for this example though, because I think it's pretty clear how you would add a hackle. If you're, at this point of the game, you probably know how to tie a hackle to the side of the fly. But for this, I'm going to show a little different thing. I like very definitive, strong lateral lines in baitfish. I think it's a really important key that predator fish kind of look for. And so what I do to keep a little bulkier profile is I throw some black flash and slinky right on the side. And this is going to do the same thing as those hackles. It's going to create that nice lateral line, but it's actually going to create a little bulkier fly that's going to push a little bit more water. Okay, and again, knowing what you're fishing for and what they react to, the bait fish that are in there, the size, the profile, water clarity, all these things are going to play into that choice. But for me, I know my fish like a little bulkier fly. Okay, they like that little more conical profile as it pushes through the water. Okay, and that using that flash and slinky as your lateral line is going to do that a little bit better. So, a lot of choices there for a lateral line. You can even throw some crystal flash in there if you want a little bit of a side flash. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little darker top. Okay, I'm going to use Peacock Flash and Slinky, one of my favorite colors, and it's a great top bait fish pattern because it blends olive and black in it. Okay, and I'm going to tie that right to the top, just like that. Okay. Then on the bottom, throw in some white. And again, just kind of measure it to the bottom. Just like that. kind of clean up that head, and then I'll show you here. Pull all that fiber back, take that vice pawn off. Excess fibers. There we go. And kind of clean up that head. Alright, tie that off, and then we'll get to making that head, which alright, so at that point I'll usually pull the fly out, kind of look at the profile, make sure I like where everything's at. And I don't necessarily trim it up at this point, but make sure I don't need to add any more or do anything. Kind of trim some of the stragglers. Alright, then I'm going to put the eyes on. Okay, so there's no, I mean, there's a lot of tricks and things to do in this, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put that eye right there. Once I set that eye on top of the fly, I'm going to take some of the UV clear thin and just give it like an attaching drop, okay, on each side. Okay, I'm going to hit it. Okay, turn it. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to take, these are the living eyes from Fish Skull. These are the earths on the 6mm, and I just kind of eyeball it even. Okay. Take another attaching drop on each side. Therefore, then my eyes are attached. Now I can kind of build my color palette. So for the top, I'm going to take olive fly finish. See it there? Okay. I'm going to fill in between those eyes and down the front of that face and hit it just like that. Okay. Hit the other side, kind of give it that fade around, wrap around. Fill in the gaps. Okay. Then on the bottom, I'm going to take some of the hot red and give it a little under gill plate, right like this. Okay. And I'll show you once I bake it in here. Hit that with the light. You can kind of see it gives it that little appearance of gills in there. There's a lot of ways you can add gills if you want, you know, with some flash out the side, but I kind of like this. And then I'm going to fill in that bottom with the clear. Thin. Bake it right there. Then just give it a good kind of clear cure. Bake it all in there. Okay, and then I'll kind of stop and I'll look at it and see if I need to fill in any area in there. And usually you're going to want to fill in a little bit on top just to kind of fill in the gap between those eyes. right. That's about it. That is the Hogan's AP Baitfish. You can tie it in many different colors for many different species, but as a lot of people start fishing for their favorite predatory fish, whether it's bass, stripers, or you're going down to Baja, this is a great pattern and very versatile. Change the colors, switch it out, know the profile you want and the bait fish forage you're looking to match and how you want it to push water, and tie it to meet your needs or your fishery and your fish. All right, this is Hogan Brown with Loon Outdoors, and we'll see you next time.